Welcome back to the channel. Today we start a new build. It's a 2015 Chevrolet Silverado 2500 HD with the 6.6 Duramax diesel. Now, it's a long bed crew cab, pretty long truck, barely fits on the trailer, and it even came with an extra bed. Well, it didn't, but they were in the same place down in Louisiana. So the truck's rest-free, so is the bed, the price is right on the bed, time to bring them all back. Even though it looks sketchy, I can assure you it's perfectly safe, as we're now in Chicago and it started out in Louisiana and it's still there. So I guarantee you it would make it to Chicago. That's what I told the guy when I picked it up. So it was listed at the auction as a no start with engine damage. Of course, the batteries are dead, so they've been on charge the whole way home, about 16 hours. So let's get it down to the shop and see if we can get it started. We got to figure out how to get it off the trailer and then how we're going to get that down. Let's give it a shot and see what happens. It's a little cold out here, so maybe we'll bring in the shop and do a little more inspecting. All I got is a click, bad starter, bad engine. Let's find out. So I have no problem getting up early. I'm up at 3 a.m. every day. However, the Shadow Gnome, being a 20-year-old, doesn't get up so early. So I have to wait for him, and I can understand when I was 20, I wanted to sleep in too. Usually because I was out the night before. Well, I was working, but no, he's out partying. I'll cut him some slack. So he's up in the front. He's going to be my engine. We're going to try and get this thing off the trailer.
I know. Going the wrong way.
Help you. So just at the end of the camera view is a truck. So it basically has to come off the trailer and fit in this little spot. So I can't get a huge running start. That's why I'm kind of taking it slow, which kind of makes this whole job a lot harder. Had I just let it go, our job would have been a lot simpler. But, well, I'm not that courageous, so I'm about to make our life a whole lot more difficult than it needed to be. So kind of got it going, and then it stopped, and it stopped. So, making the Shadow Gnome earn his keep here. He's pushing this 9,000-pound truck with all of his might. He's doing fine until we reach that piece of metal in the back of our trailer. It's about a 1/4 inch higher than the wood.
3 weeks later.
So it's clear we don't have enough gnome power to get this truck off the trailer. So what we're going to do is tie a ratchet strap onto the back of the trailer on the front of the truck. And we're going to crank it down to basically pull the truck past that little lip in the trailer and get it moving.
I got it. All right, put it park.
I got the Shadow Gnome in there working the brakes because I don't want this thing taking off. So once we got it past our stopping point, we're going to switch spots, so that when somebody crashes it, it's me, not him.
All right. We're ready to push. Don't stop.
All right. Oh, pain in the ass. Step 1, we're going to take the belt off and make sure that all of our pulleys are free. So we got our belt tensioner tool on there, aka just a breaker bar. Slip our belt off of there. Now that our belt's off, we can go ahead and spin all of our pulleys individually, make sure none are frozen up. Fun fact, I once bought an old Camaro with a quote locked up engine. They tried cranking it over for me. I was watching the engine and saw that one of the pulleys wasn't spinning. Bought the car, paid for it with a bad engine, cut the belt, started right up, drove it on the trailer. That seller was a little upset with me. But hey, sometimes you make money for your experience. Okay, so a little update on where we are. I did try to pull the belt off and try to show you guys. I don't know how much you can see. Just to make sure there were no accessories that were locked up, because that will make it sound like a locked up engine if you've got something froze up like a water pump or an alternator. Everything spins free, not the problem. So then we tried spinning the engine over. It is locked up tight in one direction, but it spins free in the other. So we spun it back a ways, tried cranking it, it cranked right up to that same point and locked up again. So we spun it back again, we spun it back forward by hand this time, locked up in the same spot. So we pulled the oil plug out of it to see what kind of oil was in there, and there was a very small amount of dirty oil. It didn't have any magic glitter in it, so nothing to clue me in on a definitely bad engine, but kind of where I'm headed. We did pull the glow plugs out of that side because they're pretty easy to get to, just to see if maybe there was any water or fuel or anything hydrolocking the cylinder. Nothing came out of that side. This side was kind of a pain to take apart, so I decided we're just gonna pull the cab off. It'll be easier to get to then. And I kind of plan on putting a motor in this thing anyway, so let's go. So I guess we're doing a motor swap, which is kind of what I figured was worst case scenario, and I happen to have one. So we're gonna pull out our closeout panel first, pull out the push pins and pop it out of there. And a little rubber seal for the side. We'll toss all that in a pile. We're gonna unbolt our grill. A couple bolts across the top. And then there's a couple of clips that hold it in, and they don't want to give up, and I don't want to break the grill. So we're just going to reach down there with a long screwdriver, kind of jam it between the clips and twist it, pop them loose, little wiggle and pull. And hopefully, with a little bit of extra work and a lot of prayers, we can not break this expensive grill. Luckily, we didn't. Now we can take our air box out of here with our excessively long screwdriver, because I'm too lazy to go get the shorter one. There's a hose clamp on this intake duct, both at the air box and at the intake. Pop those loose and wiggle it off of there. There's no oil inside it. That's a good sign. And there's usually a couple of screws to hold this cover on, but somebody's been here before.
Somebody's been here before.
So we only have a couple left. And I gave up trying to loosen them up and just decided to pull the whole air box out instead of taking it apart. I'm just choosing my struggle. My struggle is getting this whole entire thing out of here instead of struggling to take it apart to do just the same. Ha! Get it apart. Now we're going to recover our Freon. You know the system was working. It's a Louisiana truck. It's the only way those people can survive down there in the summer. I don't blame them. I'm kind of a sissy myself, so I need AC. So we're going to flip our machine on there, hit the button, and let it do its work. Ironically enough, I see more AC system failures up here by me than down there where they use them all the time. Usually it's because most AC systems corrode and leak out the Freon. You don't have a problem with that down there. So while the machine is doing its thing, we're going to go ahead and disconnect our battery, at least one of them. Pull our terminals off of there. We'll go ahead and disconnect the other one. Got a hood gasket that used to be along the fender, and now it's on the floor, but it's out of our way, so we have to use hand tools like a Neanderthal to get this terminal. Can't get our electric impact in there. Now everything's disconnected. We're no longer doing it live. Go ahead and pull our fuse box out of here. There's a latch on each side. There's a couple of lock pins to release the latches. close up the latches and just kind of wiggle it out of there. Unplug the wires in the back, give ourselves a little more room. And our fuse box / junction box pops out of there. Of course, we got a rogue wire bolted to the back of it. We'll unbolt that. Now we can take this mess out of here. The AC machine is done doing its thing, so we go ahead and disconnect the lines. Our system was full, not surprising. Then go ahead and disconnect our AC lines from our AC compressor. Pull off our sensor. And pop our line off. Pop the other one off. We'll fold them over here off to the side. We'll hook them underneath this bracket, which I assume is why GM put it there. Now we can unclip our battery cable from our fan shroud. Somebody's been here before. Those are supposed to be clipped in there, not zip tied on. I have a feeling I'm going to be somebody and clip them back in there with zip ties. But for right now, we're just going to get it out of our way. Now we can pull our trans control module off of our fan shroud. It's nice and easy to get to. I assume GM put it there because, well, they knew it was going to fail a lot. Make it easy to get out. This one's still good. At least I think it is. So we're just going to unclip it, set it up on the engine, and go with the engine. We've got our fan shroud mostly unclipped. It's multiple pieces. Pull the bracket out for our trans control module because it's in our way. One more push pins in there to pull our fan shroud apart. And then there's this piece that's in the middle. It's between the fan shroud and the bracket for our fan. It's supposed to slide back and allow us to move everything around. Unfortunately, somebody's been here before and it's got a rubber piece on the bottom that won't allow it to go where it needs to go. So we're going to unbolt the brace around our fan from the engine, and we're going to try and take our fan out of there. We're going to take as much stuff apart to try not to break everything. We'll figure it out later how we're going to put it back together. It's easier to do that when it's out of the truck. So this bracket has got 3 bolts that bolt to the engine. They're not that hard to get to, but they're also not that easy. Now that everything is loose, hopefully we can get at least one of these pieces out, and once we get one out, everything comes off. I also did take the fan clutch off, so that's also in the mix. If just one of these parts comes off, everything else comes off. And we got our fan out of there first, gives us a little more room. Unfortunately, there was a casualty, and we're going to have to fix that later. Now we'll work on the rest of this. Sometimes we got to go push it back down and take a break. Rethink our life choices. Turn off the camera and take care of business. So after some choice words and a little bit of violence, our fan shroud is out of there. Of course, there were casualties, but, well, the truck's going to know better for next time. So we're going to take off our charge pipe. I'm going to take off our intake pipe. We need to disconnect all of our power wires that come from our battery. Just going to tuck them up over here, let them go with the engine. I'm going to unbolt that bracket because I can't get to that last terminal. Now we'll head over to the other side. Got some more wires to disconnect. Just unclip all these plugs from the bottom of our fuse box. Unplug our master cylinder. We have a sensor that's bolted to the cowl and it has our wiring harness coming out of it. It's easier to just take it off of there than it is to take it off the other end. So we're just going to take it off and set it up on the engine. It'll go with the engine. We can unbolt our master cylinder from our brake booster. That way we don't have to bleed our brakes later on. We're just going to leave the system full. Slide our master off of there. Now we need to unbolt our steering shaft. We'll take it off in the middle because this is a Southern truck, so we can actually get this piece apart. I generally take it off down at the gearbox, steering box, whatever you want to call it, just because up here in the land of corruption and rust, these pieces never slide apart, but it should go apart pretty easy. There's just a nut and a bolt that goes through it. The bolt has a little bracket on the back of it that holds it so that it doesn't turn. So you just need to take the bolt out of it. And then that shaft collapses. We push that up inside the cab and our steering is separated. Now we need to disconnect our DEF tank. The filler tube comes from the cowl, runs down behind the wheel liner and then into the tank. So we're just going to unbolt it from the top of the tank and slide those clamps off of there. The tank will stay with the frame and then the filler neck will go with the cab. Now we can go ahead and drain our cooling system. I don't think I'll be climbing under here anymore, so we can make a mess. I'm actively trying not to make a mess, but it's going to happen. So while it's draining, we can go ahead and start disconnecting our lines. We got some heater hoses back here. Yay, spring clamps. That's one. That was the easy one. And that's two. We'll just stuff these up here so they don't get caught on anything, but you can be sure they will. Now we can disconnect our transcooler line from the radiator. There's another external transcooler on the front, so we have to take one line off here and one line off that transcooler. And then there's one that just runs between the two that can stay on there. I didn't have the tool to release that Jiffy type connector, at least not one that big, so I just pulled the clip out of it. Luckily, when you're working on them and they're that big, they pop right out. And here's the aforementioned external transcooler. If you're wondering why they have two coolers, you might think it's for extra cooling, but no, this is conveniently placed so that if you get hit in the front end even slightly, the bumper ends up puncturing these lines and rendering the truck non-drivable. Probably not the most ideal design. Thanks, engineers. No, really, thank you, because now I can buy these things and people think they have bad transmissions when it's just a punctured cooler line. We did get our line off of there. Just going to weasel it out so it can go with the engine, and the rest of it will go with the cab. We go ahead and pull our power steering lines off of our brake booster. It is a Hydro Boost. We'll put that back on and save the mess for later. A couple threaded lines. If you're wondering why I drove so far to get the truck, so that I could do that. Up here, that line would not come off. So those lines are going to go with the engine. And go ahead and pull our upper radiator hose off. Yay, more spring clamps. And yes, of course, I know they make a tool for that. It's in the toolbox, which is further than I care to walk. But if you don't happen to have one, go ahead and check out my Amazon store. Link is in the description. You can pick one up for yourself. I'm just going to struggle. That rubber hose and our aluminum outlet have become good friends. So I have our little hose tool in there to break up the friendship. Just kind of stab it in there, work its way around there just to break that corrosion, basically, that holds it in there, out of there. You can try twisting it, but this thing's pretty well adhered, so it's going to require more than just a little twisting and praying. Maybe a little wiggle. There we go. Sometimes I think they glue these on. And go ahead and unbolt our core support from our frame. The bolts that run through the top have a collar on them so that they won't spin. So you just got to pull the nuts off the bottom and the bushings and the washers. Now we can disconnect our shift cable, pull it off the linkage, pull the little clip out of it, squeeze the tabs and unclip it from its bracket. If you're wondering why I'm doing this on the floor, the lift wouldn't lift the truck, so we're just going to have to sit down here. Hopefully the lift will lift the cab because we need it for that. Stuff our shift cable up there. And now we can start unbolting our body bolts. There's 3 on each side. And I believe they're different, so we make sure we keep them in the right order. I'm not sure, but it never hurts to make sure you put them back in the same spot. And while I was down here, I did go ahead and disconnect the emergency brake cable so that the bottom half can stay with the frame and the rest can go with the cab. And now we're ready to start lifting it off and testing the tensile strength of everything we forgot to disconnect. So far so good.
Go ahead.
Looking for any wires that are getting stretched out. And I found some. The ground wire on the front of that frame, so we just disconnected those. Little by little, just keep checking. It's easier to take our time now than repair everything we broke later. Looks like we're clear. Go ahead and lift it all the way up. And I always get the comments saying this is a lot of work and you wonder how long this took. Well, to get to this point from where we started was about an hour and 15 minutes. We definitely could have made it in under an hour had our fan shroud cooperated and actually came apart the way it was designed to come apart. So we had a little bit of struggle there, cost us some time, but still not too much. They are designed to go together and come apart pretty easy. So if you know how to do it and you've had a little practice, it doesn't take that long. Now that that pesky body is out of the way, we can start getting our engine separated from our frame. We'll start by unbolting our exhaust. No heat required. That was worth the drive for that alone. We'll use our cordless electric hammer to knock that collar down that's stuck on our studs. And we'll head underneath and disconnect our transmount from our frame. There's 2 nuts on the bottom. Now we can unbolt the front drive shaft from the front differential. Spin it around and get to the other ones. And now I know why the engine is no good. Clearly, they didn't use a Fram filter. They used that AC Delco OEM junk. We can disconnect our fuel lines, pull off the little safeties. Put a little quick disconnects in there. And attempt not to get sprayed in the face with whatever fuel pressure remains in there. So far so good. We can unbolt our line from the engine. 2 for 2, no diesel fuel shower today. And there's a couple more brackets holding our fuel lines onto the trans. And we got some wiring harnesses that are going to stay with the frame, so we'll disconnect those. And we can unbolt our engine mounts. Probably should have grabbed an extension that wasn't bent. That's good for going around corners. These are nice and convenient, easy to get to. If only GM didn't put 6 pounds of Loctite on each bolt, it'd come out pretty easy. Grab all our bolts out of there. And now we have to pull off our front bumper. We don't technically have to. You don't need to do this part of the job, but because I can't roll the frame forward, and the engine's not going to fit between the body that's up in the air and the frame. It's easier just to take out these 6 bolts in one plug, and the one plug was already disconnected. So that's what I chose to do as opposed to rolling this the other way. Had we not had that other bed on top of this bed, we could have rolled it forward. But I need a place to store that green bed for right now, so it's going to stay up there. And I'm lazy, and I didn't feel like pulling the rear drive shaft out, so we just slid it out of the back of the transfer case. Not sure if that was a time saver or not, but we'll find out. Now we gotta hold the front drive shaft up. That's what the Shadow Gnome's job is right now, so it doesn't get stuck on anything. Hang this wiring harness up here. That's going with us. We don't want to get tangled up on something. One last check, make sure there's nothing we forgot. And hopefully we have enough room to lift this up. It's going to be close. We definitely would have hit that front bumper. That's why I took it off ahead of time. We have a rogue wiring harness that wants to get caught under the tire. Get that out of the way before we end up ripping all the connectors off of it. Now the Shadow Gnome has 2 jobs. All the wiring harness and the front drive shaft. He's a good multitasker. He'll be fine. Now we can set it on the ground and start separating the trans from our engine, which is another project all on its own. First thing we need to do is pull our starter off of here. So we'll pull our solenoid wire off. And the reason I have to take the starter off is because the bolts that hold the torque converter to the flywheel, the access is inside where the starter is. We'll unbolt our starter. Wiggle it out of there. Then we can go ahead and pull our power wire off. A lot easier now while it's out. And now we can see our little access window so we can get to our torque converter bolts. Not sure how many we're going to get to because we can only rotate the engine so far. We got 1.
Round and around you go.
Turn it?
Yeah.
Now we'll use our Shadow Gnome starter to turn the engine over.
Go ahead. There's 6. Go ahead.
And we can see our second one coming around.
Keep going.
I cannot turn
But
it.
apparently,
Gotta go a little more.
it's as far as he can go. So we'll get this one out while we're here. And then if we have to, we can leave the torque converter on our flywheel and then just separate it and take it apart later. Or we can try another method. We'll try that first and see what happens. Try not to lose that bolt down into Narnia.
Okay, try going the other way. Maybe we just went to the end of that side.
See if you can go back the other way. Maybe we'll get lucky. Just past the one we already got. And that's it. We're stuck.
Yeah.
Can't get to a third one.
Okay, I guess that's it. We only get to take 2 out.
A few moments later.
As much as I would like to share with you the method I used to get the engine to rotate past its stopping point, I didn't want YouTube to flag me for unnecessary violence, which is exactly what it required to get that thing to rotate. I just threw a 5-foot cheater bar on the end of our breaker bar and went to town. And whatever was holding that engine from turning over went pop. Well, actually it was like snap, crackle, and pop. And the engine rotated free. So we were able to spin it around, get to the rest of our torque converter bolt. What I think happened, somebody put a water pump on this thing, and there is a mismatched bolt. I think I found the bolt. I believe it's inside the engine. And I think what happened is it got caught in the chain and was locking things up. So basically, we probably snapped the chain, snapped that bolt, or snapped the gear. Whatever it was, it turned over. And later on, we'll take this engine apart and find out if my suspicions are correct. But for right now, we're just going to go ahead and swap it out. We're going to pull our bell housing bolts off. Got a couple studs on here that are holding our trans dipstick and our breather tubes. Pull those the rest of the way out. And now the transmission and our engine have become good friends, so they're kind of stuck together. We just have a little punch. We're just going to slowly work our way around and separate them. You don't want to work in one area too much because you will crack that aluminum. And once it pops off of there, we'll just slide it back a little bit, and we can lift our engine out. Set that off to the side. Later on, we'll tear it down. But right now, we have our new engine. Go ahead and drop that in there. This is not a new engine, it's a used engine from Scott's GM Truck Emporium. I know it runs. It was running when I took it out of the truck. Normally, while the two engines were sitting next to each other, I would start swapping everything over, sensors and everything else that was different. These things actually had pretty much everything was exactly the same, and since the engine I'm putting in has much lower mileage, I'd much rather use all of that stuff. So there wasn't anything really to swap over. I just kind of threw it together. Got everything lined up. We're going to go ahead and start our bell housing bolts. And yes, I probably could have pulled the engine out and left the trans in the frame, but it's actually easier to just take the whole thing out. The trans is only a few bolts, and just work on the floor here than it is to try to work around the frame and everything else. We have all our bell housing bolts started. We're going to slowly tighten them up a little bit all the way around. I'll lift up on the back of the trans and tighten up the top bolt. You don't want to just crank on one, you will crack that trans. Tighten them all up together, and we don't have to worry about breaking stuff. Torque that down to manufacturer specs for electric Ugga Duggas. I'm going to go ahead and put our torque converter bolts back in. Click. I did save you the tedious task of starting each bolt by hand, just a couple threads before we started tightening them all down. And the reason you do that is if you just tighten the first one down and you get to the second one, if you're lucky, you'll get that one, but you will not get all six. Eventually, there will be one that isn't lined up perfectly. You end up having to back it off and loosen them back up and start all over. So we just start them all and then go around again. Now that we don't need our little window anymore, we can go ahead and throw our starter back in here. A little bit different than the way we took it apart. Not just backwards, but bolt the starter in first. And we'll put our starter solenoid wire in. Make sure it's timed correctly. And then we can go ahead and put our power cable on. Click. Since we did all this work to make our fuel filter so easily accessible, we're going to go ahead and change it. It's a lot less convenient once that pesky cab is back on here. So we disconnected our little sensor at the bottom, and we just put our oil filter wrench on there and spun it off. And we're going to change our sensor at the bottom, because you don't get a new one of those. Hey, that's not the right color diesel fuel. Well, the truck did say off-road on the side, and it's off-road diesel. I guess it's, the same. The Department of Revenue has now entered the chat. If you don't know the difference, the red dye diesel is taxed differently. It's a whole lot less. You don't pay as much taxes. It's meant to be used in like farm equipment and stuff that you use off-road. Stuff that you drive on the highway is green, bluish green, and it's taxed quite a bit more because, well, our politicians need slush funds. So we have our new filter. We're going to go ahead and screw our old sensor into it. Readjust our any size wrench Make sure it fits. And we'll tighten this down to manufacturer specs. Click, click. Good to go. And we'll screw it in there. Try anyway. So you don't want to catch the threads. Must be one of those Fram filters. It's not. It's federated. Calm down, people. Make the fuel filter tightening face. It'll never be tight enough. Okay, I want my wrench back. We'll plug in our little water sensor. Now we're ready to put our engine assembly in. That was the only thing that we had to change. The Shadow Gnome has been promoted to engine tour guide, guiding us all the way into the frame. The engine is a little bit higher than it was when we took it out, so I shortened up the chains. I probably could have left the bumper on if I would have done that originally, but I'd rather not scratch up the bumper. It's only, like I said, 6 bolts and a plug, so let's just get it out of our way. Now we got a little struggle getting our drive shaft into the transfer case. It has to go perfectly straight in there so it doesn't bind up on the splines. And all of this is just because I was too lazy to unbolt the drive shaft from the differential in the back. Did I save any time? I don't know. Did it cause extra struggle? I don't know. I think we just traded struggles. We did put some oil on there, so we didn't tear up that seal. We did have a little miscommunication here on what was forward and what was backwards. I considered forward to be the front, towards the front of the truck. He considered forward to be towards the front of the forklift. So we were kind of backwards. So we got it figured out. Now we need to get our engine and trans to set down in there. It's pretty easy. Those studs on our trans mount, we just need to get those in the cross member. And if those line up, we should pretty much be able to drop our engine mounts right down on the frame side. They're basically self-aligning. Just gotta make sure that nothing's getting pinched in there. No wiring harnesses, the exhaust, any good stuff like that. Everything's looking good. Pull our mobile frame rack out of here. Disconnect all of our chains. Now we can start reconnecting everything. Go ahead and start with our fuel lines. Get it over the studs. Bolt it in. Clip them in and put our safeties on there. And we'll put our wiring harness back on. Goes underneath this vent tube. Our vent tube back on there. And work our way around. Goes under that vent tube as well. Plug everything in. Sure we didn't miss any clips. Nothing worse than that wiring harness falling down on the drive shaft and getting wrapped up in there. So now we gotta bolt the hanger for our exhaust back up to our trans. We did take that out just so that we'd have a little room and so that it was free. Click. Run our wiring harness over our transmission and plug in our transmission. Go ahead and bolt our exhaust back up. Go a little bit at a time. We need to switch tools. A lot easier to get to that other bolt underneath. sure it's going up evenly. We don't want any exhaust leaks. Not easy to get to when it's in the truck. Now we go ahead and bolt our front drive shaft in. We'll start all of our bolts and just rotate it around, tighten them all up. Torque those down to manufacturer specs. Spin it around, get the other side. And we go ahead and tighten our engine mounts down. GM put enough Loctite on there for the next 2 times, so we don't need to add any more. After you've taken the motor out for the 3rd time, then you got to re-Loctite them. Tighten up our engine mount on the other side. That's all it took. Our engine and trans is bolted to our frame, so now we can go ahead and set our cab back down. It's really not a whole lot to it. And one good thing about not rolling this frame around, we did have the wheels blocked. We can pretty much count on the fact that we can lift the cab up and set it straight down and not have to move anything back and forth or side to side or anything like that. So that is one advantage. I guess it was worth those 6 bolts on the bumper. Take our time, make sure we're not going to pinch anything in there. There's always a wiring harness or a line that wants to go where it shouldn't be. Maybe the occasional steering shaft. Take all of our tools off of our workbench and turn it back into a ladder. Give me a flat surface, I put things on it.
Okay, keep going. Hold on.
Looks good over here. Now we're going to find some busy work, looking at things we probably don't need to be looking at, just to kill time until the train goes by. One of my requirements for a new shop is no trains in the immediate area. That's the dream anyway. But given the struggle I've had finding a shop, I'm starting to think we might have to give up on that dream and just take whatever we can get. Maybe I'll get lucky and I can find a shop next to a racetrack, maybe across the street from an airport, next to a interstate, you know, someplace quiet. Still better than 50 feet from a railroad crossing. Honestly, I've dealt with those trains, never bothered me at all until I started making videos. I actually don't even hear them. They just get tuned out. But when you're making videos, you kind of pay attention to that. I can actually hear the dinging of the crossing. So I usually know when the trains are coming before the video does, and I kind of stop filming. So it does take longer just because of that. It's really an inconvenience. Whatever, the train is gone, we can get back to work. At least that train is gone. Give it 5 minutes, there'll be another one. Don't worry. As promised, there's our other train. There was no cut in the video, it wasn't even 5 minutes. It was more like about 20 seconds, and we got another train. The reason for that is it's both commuter trains and freight trains that go past here, and there's 2 tracks. So I don't know how they get so many trains on that track, but they do. I assume it's only so that they can interrupt my videos. And there's a crossing every block all the way through town, and we're at one end of town. So you get to listen to the train horn every time they reach another crossing. Unless you get the overambitious guys and they just lay on the horn from one end of town to the other. Those are my absolute favorite. Luckily, that was a commuter train that didn't stop, so it went flying past and it was gone. When they stop and slow down, that's when it takes a whole lot longer. So did the freight trains. Oh, we're going to keep lowering it down little by little, making sure we get everything lined up, nothing gets pinched. Definitely don't want to smash that master cylinder on the brake lines.
All right, go down some more.
Looks like we're good to go. Our cab has landed.
All right, we're on.
So now we can start reconnecting stuff. Start with the trans line up in the front here. Snap it in there. Make sure our little lock ring is where it belongs. We can bolt our ground wires into our frame. These are the ones we almost forgot to disconnect and ripped apart, but caught them because we were paying attention. We can put our bushings on and our nuts on to hold the core support down to its mounts. Tighten those up. We got our own threads on that one. We go ahead and reconnect all of our battery cables on our little junction box over here. And bolt our bracket back in. We can reconnect our heater hoses. Yay, spring clamps. Make sure you get the timing right on those. And we got another hose that goes to the bottom of our overflow tank. Slide that back on there. And we'll start reconnecting our electrical plugs. They just clip into the bracket on the bottom. Put our sensor back on our firewall. And put our ground strap back on. Tighten that down. Put our master cylinder on there. Tighten that up to the brake booster. Click. Click. One little plug here. Guess they didn't have room for it in the junction box. Screw in our lines for our brake booster, our power steering lines, and tighten those down. I reuse the O-rings, take a gamble. They're pretty easy to get to if they start leaking, so we can change them later. Slide the return hose on there and slide our spring clamp down. Make sure you get the timing correct on that spring clamp. It's very critical. Apparently I wasn't joking. And go ahead and tighten up our steering shaft. We did slide it back together and put that bolt in there. Now we're ready to put our charge pipe in here. Over the hill and through the woods. It does not fit in there. It seems like it would be easy to get in and out, but it's a little bit of a challenge. Tighten
Go down on the intercooler. And tighten down the other end. Then we can put our intake resonator on there. Basically just keeps you from hearing the air rushing sound. Slips in the front. Flips down on an O-ring. Just use your belt molding installation tool. Might need to upgrade it to the bumper installation tool if it won't clip in. And bolt it down. Good to go. Now we need to bleed the air out of our fuel system. Since we changed our fuel filter and had the lines apart. So there's a little drain plug on the back. Just pull that out. And this little silver thing is a pump. And we're just going to pump it, and it's going to pump the fuel up there until we get all of our fuel and air out of there. Takes a little while. It's what you do every time you change the fuel filter on these. Once we get Old Faithful spraying out of there, we'll go a little bit slower, and then just watch the air bubbles come out. Usually it doesn't take this much, but since our fuel lines were empty, there's a little bit of pumping involved. There we go. We got our Old Faithful. I'll just slowly press it down and watch the air come out. And when we aren't getting any more air bubbles, we go ahead and put our cap back on. We're getting nothing but fuel now, no air, so we can put our little cap in there. Not a bad design, just wish they would have put it in a better location. And we can go ahead and put our fuse box / junction box back in. Get it on the guide pins. That's the hard part. And once it's in there, just move the levers and lock them in. And that pretty much makes your connections all across the board. Got that one rogue wire that was in the back, so we'll bolt that down. Little cover on it. Now we need a nap, so we're going to climb down on the creeper and pretend to work underneath. We'll put our emergency brake cable back through our frame and reconnect that. Let me go ahead and bolt our body mounts down. And also, while we're under here, we'll go ahead and reconnect our shift cable. The next shop is going to have a lift that will lift trucks like this. I promise. Because I'm too lazy to be working on the ground anymore. We'll reconnect the DEF filler pipe to the DEF tank. Because, yay, emissions. And for everyone that says, well, it's helping the environment, I would like to point out that the EPA is racist. Because the whole reason for that is they didn't like the black smoke. Instead, they put some stuff in there that crystallizes it and turns it white. Does it get rid of it? No, it just makes it a different color. But now it's okay. Sounds racist to me. All joking aside, it is not eliminating emissions at all. It's basically just crystallizing it and putting it into the ground instead of the air. I have a hard truth for many people to swallow. Your government hates you. Nothing they do is for your benefit. So we still have to put the fan and shroud and all that good stuff in there, but I really hate that job, so let's see if it starts before we go getting into that. Place your bets. I don't know about you guys, but I can't get any of the gnomes to bet against me anymore. I did get the roaming gnome to bet against me in the beginning. The Shadow Gnome never took the bait, so no more free lunches for me. One of these times I'm going to have to sabotage it so that I can win. But I'm not perfect. There's going to be that day where I do forget a wire or a plug or who knows what. Fuel line, anything that keeps it from starting.
Okay, finished putting together.
We'll go ahead and throw our front bumper back on here, which we inevitably are going to take back off of here. Because if you look, there is no lower balance. Actually, there's probably 2/3 of a lower balance. And the reason for that is it has oversized tires on this thing, and they were probably hitting the edge of that balance. So they cut it out, and made it custom so that it would clear those tires. So we're going to eventually put the balance back on once I figure out what I'm doing with these tires. But I want to drive it around and make sure everything's okay before I go investing any money into tires and wheels and balances and all that kind of stuff. So this truck might be around for a little while. I mean, it is a crew cab with an 8-foot bed, big tires. So it's very useful for hauling things and also for compensating for, small peepees. I did originally buy it just to use up the extra engine that I had and flip it, but it has become very practical and it has a special purpose now. So when it's done with that purpose, or I get that enlargement I've been waiting for, then I can sell it. So we're going to go ahead and throw our cooling fan back in here and also our cooling fan brace. I guess that's what you call this thing. It bolts to the engine. And now we are going to fix our little oopsie. When I was pulling the fan out of there, I nicked the top of the radiator and put a hole in it. So I had to put a new radiator in it. Luckily, my camera didn't want to film me fixing my mistake. So we don't have to admit that I made it, I guess. So we did throw a new radiator in here, put our fan shrouds in here. I tried to film it, but as you saw, the footage was not only corrupted, but half of it was missing. So that is a brand new shiny radiator. We're going to reconnect our cooling system and go from there, which is probably just as well because that radiator was just packed solid with junk. So I would have had to clean it out anyway. Not internally, but externally. It had fuzzies all over it. We'll throw our grill back in here, even though we're going to have to take this back out to remove our bumper later. We can't drive around without a grill. That wouldn't be cool. You got to look like we're driving in style. Bolt the top of it back in. Make sure it's all clipped in there. Then we'll throw our closeout panel in. Maybe throw 1 or 2 push pins in, but we don't need much. It's not coming out of there, and we are taking that out again 100%.
So this might look a little sketchy. At least that's what the Louisiana State Police said when they stopped me. I asked where my straps were, and they said they're right there. He said, that ain't going nowhere. That's what I said when I flicked the straps, so you can be sure of it. But in addition to that, there's some 2x2s that go from this stake pocket to this stake pocket. Kind of acts like a pin, keeps this thing from moving around, as if the straps weren't already doing enough. And then I put a couple straps on and said, well, what if one of them breaks? So I put a couple more on, and then I said, well, I got one more. And, well, we got 5 straps on this thing. Guess we'll get rid of our spider web. Okay.
So how old is this video, you ask? Well, this is the bed that I used on that regular cab short bed rollover that was red. I painted black. And since that thing is long gone, that gives you an idea of how long ago I did this job. I've been hiding this truck from you guys. And gladly, because I want to keep it. So it's not for sale yet. I will let you know when it's for sale. So don't attack me with the emails saying, can I buy the truck from your latest video? Which is what I always get on the first video I release of every vehicle. So no, the answer is you can't have it. And no, I won't save your email and email you when it's ready because I'm not that organized. So just keep paying attention and you'll know when it's for sale.
So now that it runs, I'm going to drive it around a little bit, make sure everything's okay, and then we'll start doing some of the work on it. We got a little dent here, and I'd have to say that that looks like one of those darn my truck won't start kind of dents. So I'll have to take care of that. Little gouge in this molding here. Gotta take care of that. Somebody mistook the side of this truck for a pheasant, because it is bird shot for sure. Either that or somebody sat here and shot it with a bunch of BBs. But I'm thinking it's bird shot. They opened the door into something. So we got a couple little dents to fix, and then a bunch of chipped up paint. So we're gonna end up painting these two doors. This handle, because it's worn out. Opening the door a million times. So we'll paint this side, and I think we're just gonna leave the bed alone. It's a work truck. A little dent here. Got an outie here and here. And a couple little dings. Like I said, it's a work truck. The bed's gonna get dinged up anyway, so I have a dealer name to remove there. That looks like it back here. We'll leave the dents in the bumper, they'll match the bed. We're also gonna have to paint that sill. I'm climbing in and out, it wore the paint off, and now it's starting to rust, so we're just gonna blend that in. This is just regular white, it's not pearl, so no biggie. And then there's the interior. A little wear on the seat, not too bad. Ooh, that's dirty under there. Look away, clean freaks. Looks like we're going to be able to make some console stew. Definitely going to need a good cleaning. But it's a work truck. What do you expect? So I do want to drive it around, but I'm no clean freak, so you know I'm not going to clean it. But it's even a little bit too dirty for me. So I found a solution. Nice and clean now. If you can't see the dirt, it's not dirty. Am I right, clean freaks? So that's about as far as we're gonna go on our big white Silverado here. We got it running. I did a little cleaning, at least enough to drive it. So we'll put some miles on it, and when we come back, you'll find out. Is he really gonna leave it like that? Maybe. So tune in next time to see if I actually clean it and all the rest of the work we do on it. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you then. Nothing like the first test drive a new engine and a truck you know nothing about, like hooking a trailer to it and going on a 30-mile road trip to pick up a car or two. Well, I guess we'll find out if it's working.
I don't ever slow up, no I don't take I got no love for the fakeness. If you wanna play tough and wanna hate this, I'll always show up and make a statement. I don't ever slow up, no I don't take I got no love